Welcome to this chemistry cookie tutorial where safety is the #1 priority. Okay, so there's two primary reasons that I'm putting this video together. The first is to show you how to vary your ingredient 3 different ways if you're choosing to vary an ingredient. The other part of this is to show you how to think about chemistry in terms of what's happening with the chemical reactions with your cookie when you go to do your presentation. So let's jump right in. You can see I have all the materials here, and I have my oven going. It's at 350 degrees over here. So if you're changing the temperature, that's not too hard. You bring the oven up or down. Just don't change it by more than, say, 25 degrees, right? Your recipe typically calls for 350. So try baking 1/3 of your recipe, right? Once you get all your ingredients together, split them into 3. Do one batch at, let's say, 365, and then do another batch at 350, and then do another batch at 335. If you're changing the time, same thing. You get all your ingredients together, boom, split it into 3. Your first batch, do it for 15 minutes or whatever. The next batch, do it for an extra 5 minutes. The next batch, do it for 5 minutes less. But if you are trying to change the ingredients, that's going to be a little more tricky. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to put everything together except for the one ingredient that you're changing, and then you will add that ingredient last, but you will add it to 3 different batches, and you will add it in 3 different parts. One will be what the recipe calls for, one will be less ingredient than what the recipe calls for, one will be more. All right, so let's jump right in. This recipe calls for all the ingredients you see here, but I'm going to change the sugar, so I'm going to leave that out until the last. So normally the first thing that I would do is I would cream all of the sugar and the butter together, but since we're not doing that, I'm just going to put the butter in and leave the sugar out until last. So here's my 2 sticks of butter. All right, now here is the sugar. I'm using the chocolate chip recipe, which calls for brown sugar and white sugar. So we'll put both of those things in together. Now remember, I'm going to be using this ingredient last. I'm going to save it for last, so I'm just combining, and I've got 2 cups of sugar here, and it's pretty stirred together, and now I'm going to set that aside. So since I'm not doing the sugar right now, I'm going to go ahead and add all the other ingredients. So the next thing it calls for is the eggs. Eggs go right in. And then it calls for the vanilla. So I'll point out that all of the ingredients here are manufactured by DNA. That's an interesting science tidbit. These are all biologically created, with the exception of maybe the salt and the baking soda. Everything else is very complex molecules. They can only be created by living creatures. All right, so vanilla is another slight exception because vanilla actually comes from the vanilla bean. These are vanilla beans from Madagascar. So this is where vanilla flavor originally came from. You have these little seed pods, and the seeds are very tiny. I will just get a few here and hold my finger up, and you can see that. That's a vanilla bean. This is just for flavoring. This imitation vanilla is a chemically manufactured product, but it's chemically identical to the flavor of vanilla beans. So anyways, let's add some of that in there. And you know what? I really like vanilla, so I'm just going to add another little splash of this vanilla too. Pop that seal. And now we've got our major ingredients. So you can stir these up. I'm going to use a blender here just to save some time. Slowly do this. Remember, if you are doing this, don't turn the mixer on until it's all the way in. Otherwise, you're going to get some splatters everywhere. Your mom's going to be freaking out. You got our kitchen all dirty. And you're like, but Mom, I'm making you cookies for Mother's Day. She's like, yeah, well, you're also going to clean up this kitchen for Mother's Day. All right. So now that we have those ingredients, let's see here, what's next? We're going to add our baking soda. Now baking soda needs to react, so we put it in water. Remember, hot water is what this recipe calls for. And that's one of the, remember, water is the universal solvent. It does a great job of helping molecules get around where they need to. So we just dump our baking soda in here, stir it up a little bit so that it can interact with the other materials. And we will add our salt as well. Salt is not a major ingredient that we're talking about in this reaction, but a lot of recipes call for salt just because they give the recipe an extra little zing. Now we have all our ingredients except for the flour and the chocolate chips. Again, flour is an ingredient you could vary. Chocolate chips, we are not varying. Those are not really participating so much in the chemical reaction. So we won't be changing that. All right, we've got everything together here, so let's go ahead and give this a good blend. These ingredients are super dry, and if it's like that, you may need to add some water. But the idea is that you want something about the consistency of Play-Doh. Now, when I was a kid, I used to love to lick these things, but I would encourage you to avoid doing that if you can because of salmonella, which is another virus, similar to coronavirus. But that is a discussion for another day. Okay, so we have our dough now, right? Now remember, we haven't added sugar to this yet, so we still need to do that. So what we are going to do is we're going to split this dough into 3 different bowls. And we're going to get that as even as we can. Let me just get some of this mess moved over. So we're just going to get a nice blob and eyeball this, but get it as close as you can visually. You want to try to get as close as you can, having the same amount in each bowl, so that your recipe and your experiment is as accurate as it can be. If you have a kitchen scale and you want to use that, great. It'll take some extra time, but it will add to the accuracy of your experiment, but it's not really necessary. Let's see here. So the idea when you run an experiment is that everything stays the same except for one variable. That's it. If you try 2 variables, then you can't really account for what the change was if you see a change in your experiment, because it could be one variable or it could be the other variable that made the difference. So we stick to one variable when we do these experiments. All right. So you can see I've got my 3 ingredients. Now I want to add my sugar, but I want to do this in a way that changes the sugar levels depending on which bowl I'm putting it into. So one serious part of this is that you have to think about not losing track of which is which. So label them. I recommend using foil because you can stick foil right in the oven and keep track of which is which. This says, you can read it, says more sugar. So we'll do this one as more sugar. And my other is still on the floor over here. This one's going to be what the recipe calls for, the correct sugar. This we'll call less sugar, which means I need another bowl. So let me grab it real quick. All right, now I have the sugar here. So you'll need to divide by 3. This recipe called for 2 cups. So you divide 2 by 3, you get 2/3. So each of these, in a perfect world, would each have 2/3 of a cup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and measure that out. I'm going to put 2/3 of a cup in each bowl here. All right. 2/3. It's going to be right about there. All right, so there's 2/3. And then let's do the next 2/3. All right, just a little bit more. Okay. So there's 2/3. And the last, if I've done this right, should also come out 2/3. And it doesn't quite. You know, I heaped up a lot of sugar in this one, so I'm just going to take out a little bit just to even these out. Both coming right up to 2/3. It was sticky, so some of the sugar stuck the first time. All right, so these look pretty much even. So this is more sugar, correct, and less sugar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a spoon, and if you want to be scientific about this, you can put it in your report. You can do that. Use where's our tablespoon measurement here? I'll just use this spoon. So we're going to take 1 spoon of sugar out of the less sugar, and we're going to put it in the more sugar, okay? And then I'm going to do 1 spoon more. So that would be roughly 2 tablespoons, okay? So this is 2/3 of a cup, this is 2/3 of a cup minus 2 tablespoons, this is 2/3 of a cup plus 2 tablespoons. All right, now that I've done that, I can go ahead and add. Remember, keep track of what's what. Don't want to get it mixed up. Okay, now blender, not such a great idea for a bowl this small because you're just guaranteed to go send stuff flying everywhere. So I'm gonna do this the old-fashioned way and stir that in with a spoon. I'll do this after the video because there's other things that are more crucial, but that should give you an idea of how to split your ingredient 3 different ways, okay? Basically, you put everything together, split it into 3 evenly, and then take your 1 ingredient, split it into 3 evenly, and then take some from 1 bowl and then add it to the other bowl, and then combine and cook. And don't forget to label them. All right, so now that we've talked about that part,